Yep.
I'll let you know when it's rolling. All right, take it away.
Great. Well, welcome everybody to our Occoquan, sort of a little bit of Woodbridge, Lake Ridge, Prince William County General Assembly Town Hall meeting. I am joined here with Senator George Barker, and Delegate Hala Ayala is going to be joining us in a few minutes. But we want to talk to you a bit about what's going on this session, but most importantly, take a bunch of questions from you guys. So before I get into all that, I'm just going to introduce myself and then turn it over to George. He can introduce himself. When Hala gets here, we'll get her. But I'm Senator Scott Suravel. I represent the 36th Senate District, which at least for the next 6 months includes part of Fairfax County. And down here in Prince William County, I have the town of Occoquan, and it runs up Old Bridge Road past Woodbridge High School up to near the Chin Library, and then wraps around through along the east side of US 1 down to Dumfries and Triangle, and then back up to Montclair, up towards the Prince William County landfill, Prince William Forest Park, et cetera, within Prince William County, about 110,000 people, and then about 4 precincts in Stafford. But I've been in the Senate now for about 5 years, serve on 5 committees. I'm the vice chairman of our caucus, the Democratic Caucus. This is my 11th or 12th General Assembly session now, and I served in the House of Delegates for 6 years before I was elected to represent you guys in the Senate. And that's a little bit about me. And George, why don't you introduce yourself really quick?
Sure. I'm George Barker, state senator as well. I represent the 39th district, which includes about a little over 25% of my district, about 30% of my district is in Prince William County. It does not go into the town of Occoquan, but I start at the western border of the town of Occoquan, go up Old Bridge Road, and go all the way to Manassas and Manassas Park. In that area, get out to Route 28, just north of Manassas Park. And I've been representing the area for about 14 years now. And actually, Scott, you will be representing Prince William for the next 3 years. So your district doesn't change, even though new lines hopefully will be drawn fairly soon that will go into effect after the 2023 election.
Got it. Yep. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the sort of the bigger issues for the session, and then after that, I'm going to kick in and talk a little bit about what I'm trying to get done. And then George can cover some big issues as well, and then talk to you about what he's doing this session. So first of all, we're in a short session. This is a 46-day session that we're in. Don't believe the media when they tell you it's 30, it's really 46. But it's our short session. We have a 60-day session and a 45-day session. This is the 46-day session. And the reason it's a little shorter is because we don't draft an entire budget for 2 years. We only make tweaks to it. And then we also come in and clean up legislation that we, and do legislation like normal, but we have a smaller amount of time to get it done. The budget stuff, I'm going to leave mostly to George. But I think a big variable there we're waiting for us to hear was what the federal government's going to send us in terms of additional aid. Now that we have Democratic control in the U.S. Senate, I think a lot of people are anticipating we're going to see a big state and local aid package that's probably going to come from the feds. Another sort of money type thing I just want to make everybody aware of is on Tuesday, the Commonwealth Transportation Board issued recommendations on funding for transportation projects under the Smart Scale program. And there were 2 projects in Prince William that they agreed to fund that are relevant to you all. One is the widening of Route 1 through Dumfries, which is going to totally transform the town of Dumfries. But more importantly, they recommended to fund $30 million towards reconstructing the intersection of Old Bridge Road and the Prince William County Parkway. Right over there, I forget the name of the shopping center, but it's right near the baseball stadium. And it's where the Prince William Parkway goes up and then jogs to the left. It's a messy intersection. And they're basically going to redesign it so that it's a smooth curve with a stoplight instead of a 4-way intersection, which will help traffic flow through there a lot better. And it'll probably, I know when I have to go to the Prince William Courthouse in the morning, it usually costs me about 4 or 5 minutes. And I'm sure that for those of you who live next to it every day, it's going to save everybody a lot of time to get that rebuilt. So I was excited to see the state decided to fund that. Some other big stuff that's out there. we're just gonna see, we're seeing a bunch of bills about voting. This is the year to do constitutional amendments. There's the constitutional amendment to give everybody the constitutional right to vote, to remove a Jim Crow era prohibition on felon voting from our Constitution. There's also legislation to remove the witness requirement for absentee ballot applications, which a lot of people see as being unnecessary. That we actually, it was abolished by a judge in the last election that we just had. I don't know of anybody that saw any problems from that, but we're going to make that permanent. Marijuana legalization is a bill that's out there. I'm on the subcommittee that reviewed that on the Rehabilitation and Social Services Committee. I'm also on the Judiciary Committee, which looks at it next this week to look at the sort of criminal legal consequences of that and expungement. After that, we're going to send it to the Finance Committee where George gets to take his shot at it. And then everybody gets a shot at it on the floor, but it's a really huge bill with a lot of tentacles to it. I'm not clear where it's going to come out, but we're trying to get a lot done. Basically, we're setting up a new agency to regulate marijuana separate from the alcohol control. It would allow retail establishments a certain limited number to sell recreational marijuana and edibles and things like that within the state. We would take the crime off the books. All the marijuana crimes would come off the books and become civil infractions, similar to the way that we regulate alcohol. Anybody who has a marijuana conviction would receive an automatic expungement. If it was a misdemeanor, if it's a felony, you could file a petition to get an expungement, is the way it's worded right now. And then we're having some discussions about what to allow people to grow at home, sort of how many plants and how you would exactly figure that out. And then there's a whole series of questions about social equity in terms of how do we do this in a way that ensures that some of the communities that have been impacted by marijuana being illegal benefit in terms of creating jobs and building capital in those communities. And then the whole question about where does the money go? Right now, we're talking about using it to fund, I believe, pre-K and drug treatment and, the cost of enforcement, et cetera, but the cost of regulation. So there's a lot of questions we're still teasing out. I'm not sure we're going to get it totally done this session. I hope we will, but at least parts of it we can, I think, and hopefully we'll get the whole thing done. But it's a really big, complicated situation. We have a couple of firearm bills out there. I know Senator Eben put in a bill to permanently prohibit firearms on Capitol Square. I think given what just happened to the U.S. Capitol, I think it's important that we put that in our code and not just rely on our governor to continue to have that rule in place. There's bills to facilitate our vaccine response. We just passed emergency legislation on Friday to broaden the class of people that can administer vaccine shots and to get as many people as possible ready to start helping with that deployment. And then I've got a bunch of bills I filed. I mean, we're only allowed to file 12 bills this session, but I filed my 12th bill on Friday. Just really quick, hit some of those. Number one, last year I introduced legislation to authorize class action lawsuits in Virginia. Us and Mississippi are the only two states in America that don't have class action lawsuits at the state level. And it's important for a lot of reasons, which I'm happy to talk about. The bill passed the Senate last year, died in the House committee on a tie vote, or died by like one vote. I have a legislation to raise our automobile insurance minimum policy limits. That's going to be on the floor actually on Monday. Virginia has not raised its auto insurance limits since 1975. Which is crazy. Cars cost an average of $4,000 back then. Medical bills were a lot cheaper. And the policy is designed to ensure that everybody has enough insurance to pay if somebody gets hurt. So that's out there, and I'm optimistic. That also passed the Senate last year, died in the House. I have a bill to require greater disclosure of arbitration. Arbitration is increasingly being used by corporate America to sort of hide discrimination lawsuits involving women or minorities or others. It's also a way that they can hide bad consumer conduct by forcing consumers into arbitration, which are not nearly as transparent as people being sued in court. And so my bill basically says that localities can ask companies about their arbitration practices before doing business with them. And then I also have a bill to expand expungement. Virginia has one of the most restrictive expungement rules in the country. 41 states allow expungement of misdemeanor convictions, and 36 allow expungement of felony convictions. Virginia doesn't allow either. And so the legislation I'm proposing would bring us sort of up to speed with the rest of the country, and also create liability for these private data companies that buy information about you and me and then sell it to other people for access. And they sell inaccurate reports and inaccurate data all the time. And it would create liability for them so that they would be held accountable and clean up their practices. So it's pretty scary, the amount of data they have out there about you. Then I also have a bill to confirm the ability of somebody to bring a lawsuit against a law enforcement officer who engages in either deadly or excessive force in an improper fashion. It's not a broad qualified immunity repeal, which is what a lot of people want, but it focuses mainly on abuse of force when hands are put on people in an improper way. I'm hopeful we might be able to get something done this year on that. I have a couple bills to help out our immigrant community. 1 out of 4 people in my district was born in another country. And I have a bill to expand the ability of young undocumented immigrants who have been abandoned by their parents to obtain legal status using a federal system that's currently in place. And also another bill that would help undocumented immigrant crime victims apply for visas. Because right now there's some law enforcement officers around the state that refuse to help them in that when they're crime victims. And this would incentivize people to cooperate. Other than that, I have a bill to help with utility undergrounding on Route 1. I'm not going to talk about that because that doesn't really affect Prince William so much. And then I have a bill that Senator Barker is very familiar with because he's our healthcare expert, in addition to being our budget expert and our redistricting expert. But it basically revises Virginia's Healthcare Fairness Act and requires healthcare providers to provide their bills to their insurance company within 120 days of when the service is rendered. And the reason that's important is because if people are on a high deductible plan, you need to know how much of your deductible that you have remaining in order to decide whether or not to get certain medical care or not. And if your provider, waits 6 months or a year to put their bill in, it can really result in you getting a surprise out of pocket, having to write a check that you weren't anticipating. And so it's important that your provider provide that bill really quickly. And that's a little bit of what that bill does. There's a bunch of other sort of technical stuff, which is probably pretty boring to people, but that's the main thrust of that. And then I got a couple budget amendments I've put in for a groundwater monitoring well. You all probably don't realize this, but everyone who lives right near 95 and to the east sits on top of the Potomac Aquifer, which is actually losing water. The amount of water is going down, and the state's not doing any monitoring of that well anywhere north of Fredericksburg. And we're particularly at risk because we're right up against the Piedmont, and the aquifer is really skinny right where we are. And so it's particularly at risk for being depleted, and there's no monitoring going on. And there are people in our area who get their water actually from the ground and not from the Occoquan Reservoir. And we need to make sure that that's protected. And then I also have a bill to do a $300,000 grant program to help facilitate people getting their driver privilege cards. We passed legislation last session to make driver privilege cards available to 300,000 undocumented immigrants, but many of them don't know how to navigate the process. And in other states, they fail the test about 3 times before they pass it. And so if we can do a grant program to help teach people the process, they bring the right papers, they pass the test the first time, you won't clog up the DMV for other people who need to get in there for their services. And so I'm hopeful that will also help to alleviate the DMV backlog. So that's just a few things I'm working on, but I'm mainly here to hear your questions. So now I'm going to turn it over to George, and he can tell us what he's doing. And then Hala, you just got on. We already introduced ourselves. You can introduce yourself and then tell everybody about what you're doing when George is done. How's that? Okay.
Thank you, Senator Zerville, and great to see you, Delegate Ayala, here with us today. So glad you're able to join in quickly here. So I just want to go over a few things. As Senator Zerville said, I'm heavily involved in the budget. Sort of the assistant to Senator Janet Howell, who's the chair of the Finance Committee. So I've already been on a couple of calls yesterday and today. A number of things that we're working on the budget. Actually, our fiscal situation is surprisingly good right now. We are running about 8% ahead of last year in terms of general fund revenues, despite the fact that we're dealing with the pandemic, and we're likely to finish probably close to 10% ahead of revenues from last year because we still have April and May to go through, which was the really bad years in 2020. So the bad months in 2020. So we are actually have been able to restore a lot of the funding that we put in the budget last year, but then got frozen for a period of time because we were concerned that there would be a substantial decrease. We are actually probably in better shape than almost any state in the entire country in terms of our overall economic situation and our budget situation. So we are actually be able to continue funding things the way we had been prior to the pandemic hitting. And also, as has been noted, there are a good bit of federal monies that have come into Virginia as well as other states across the country. There was a major bill that was passed in December and signed by President Trump to provide about $900 billion in various funding categories. And I'll quickly go over a couple of things on that in a moment. But we do also have in right now a proposal from the new Biden administration for spending about another $1.9 trillion to help make sure we get through this pandemic. Certainly with the progress is being made on vaccines now, it's been a little slow, but we are ramping it up. We're pretty much out of vaccines in a number of places throughout the Commonwealth, including in some places in Northern Virginia. So we're working at trying to deal with that. We did come forward with a major bill that was introduced just on Thursday and then was passed in the Senate yesterday. We've got it on a fast track to get it out because what it will do is allow a lot of healthcare professionals to quickly become volunteers to get the vaccines into people's arms as soon as there's enough vaccine that's available. So that will make a huge difference. We are behind in Prince William, partly because we've not had the personnel to be able to implement, to get the vaccines injected. But this will make sure that we are able to get enough volunteers who are medical professionals who can help out and get us caught up in terms of where we are on things. So we're trying to figure everything we can to maximize the opportunities for getting the vaccine out there. Just a couple of major things from the federal stimulus bill that was passed in December. One is that there is a significant amount of funding to help people, renters who are having difficulty paying their rent as a result of losing a job or having their hours dramatically reduced, which a lot of people have. But we will be able to getting about $570 billion, $70 million for housing and utility relief that we will be able to use to be able to build on the programs we put in place back when we had our special session in the fall. What this means is that we should have the more than enough resources to make sure that throughout the rest of the pandemic period, that anyone who's in trouble because of having lost a job or had hours reduced will be able to get some assistance from eviction and those types of things, and we'll be able to get that assistance to cover their rent cost, or at least a portion that they don't have resources to be able to pay for. So that's a tremendous relief for a lot of people, because previously we had funding that went through December 30, the end of December to be able to provide that relief, but did not have it extended beyond that. And there's also, I guess, a new executive order issued by President Biden that will help a lot of people, not everyone who would have been in that situation, but will help a lot of people make sure that they are exempt from eviction. We will probably put an eviction preemption provision in the budget this year, basically saying as long as anyone accesses the money from this pool of funds that we have, they will not, and pays their rent from that, they will not be evicted. We also are going to be getting a substantial amount of money for education. One of the things is that they've made clear is that that money has to be spent specifically for either K-12 or higher education services. You have to maintain at least the percentage of your total spending in the education field as to what it was for the last 3 years. So with that being the situation, you will be guaranteed that we will be able to put all that money into education, as well as some additional money that's in there to address a variety of issues there. And it may give us sort of an opportunity to make a head start on some of the things where we have been languishing in education funding for the last decade or so and have fallen behind. We're talking about that right now in the Finance Committee to be able to do that. And that would include things like continuing to expand the pre-K program, of which there are very few students in Prince William County right now, so that we can try to get every 4-year-old into pre-K in some setting, and particularly in the public school setting or other publicly supported ones for those who are below 200% of poverty. So that, I think there's a tremendous opportunity to build that program out the rest of the way. We did restore funding in that, a substantial amount of funding in the special session in the fall. And here I think we have an opportunity to build on that and maybe to begin to address some of the other issues, such as not having fully covered all the retirement costs of the teachers and other school system employees, as well as state employees, and also not providing adequate reimbursement for a lot of the support positions. We do provide our shares, the state share, for the funding for teachers, but we really need to go much beyond that and make sure the entire school systems have coverage long term. So there are a lot of things that will be good there. Our economy is actually doing pretty well. We are one of only a handful of states that have an unemployment rate of less than 5% right now. So ours went up somewhat during the first stages of the pandemic, but it's come back down dramatically to be less than half of what it was at its peak. And we are really in good shape in terms of getting that reduced for even further. As part of that, we are making some significant initiatives to move forward to help increase the number of jobs. As everyone's all aware, I'm sure, Amazon is on its way into Northern Virginia in a large fashion, and we're going to be sort of the HQ to their second headquarters, at the other one being in Washington State in the Seattle area. So there will be a substantial number of jobs. It was guaranteed to be at least 25,000 jobs, but it looks like it's going to be far greater than that. So that's helping boost our economy in Virginia, but particularly in Northern Virginia. And we now have an agreement with Microsoft to have their second quarters in Northern Virginia, which will be in the Reston area. So have been supportive of a lot of those types of things. Companies are coming here because they see Virginia as a great state to do business in, a state where we have a lot of well-trained and educated workers that and people who are used to working and working hard there to get things done, for their companies. And also have the housing costs are much less than in places like California or Seattle or Boston or New York, places like that. So we have a lot of things that make Northern Virginia a good place. And I was on a Zoom meeting just a couple of days ago with the head of the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, which is a state operation. We stole the guy from Louisiana, who's probably the top guy in the country in terms of business development. And so we're moving in the right direction there to build back our economy as quickly as possible. And he indicated he's much more optimistic now than he was even just a couple of months ago on how quickly things are starting to rebound now. And we're also dealing with a number of human services issues. I have legislation in because we've received a large amount of money from settlements in the opioid cases from various drug companies and others who were in effect peddling things and putting a lot of pressure on that resulted in some of the opioid problems that we have now, and not really reporting some of the some of the negative effects of those drugs when they were first on the market there. So that will help us a lot in terms of being able to provide a lot of assistance to communities to deal with both the drug problems that we have and also the related crime issues that we have as a result of that. So we're doing a lot there. We've got legislation moving forward again to make sure that we lock in the increase in telehealth that has come over the last year since the pandemic hit. Has been dramatic increase in telehealth. We were already one of the leading ones in the nation, but we've quadrupled the number of visits that are now being done by telehealth to make sure that patients can safely receive input from their physicians and nurse practitioners and other providers and can manage things well. And just finally, we're taking some significant steps to deal with the climate change issue, which is a huge issue for the entire world, to tell you the truth. Last year, we passed a legislation basically saying by 2045, Virginia is going to be operating in a net carbon, zero net carbon contribution. So we're starting to do things to implement that. I had some legislation last year dealing with agreements between local governments and developers of solar farms and those types of things. This year, I got a bill in to expand it to energy storage capacity, which is one of the new technologies that has great potential as we continue to develop it to be able to reduce the amount of greenhouse gases that have to be produced right now you generate energy, but a lot of it then dissipates and you have to regenerate it before it's used there. So we're doing a lot of things that I think are very positive, and there are chair of the transportation subcommittee of the Senate Finance Committee, and we do have some additional federal funds that are going to be available there. So we'll be able to add to a couple of things that Senator Searle will talk about. And with that, I'll turn it over to Delegate Ayala.
Thank you, Senator Barker and Senator Searle. Thank you to all who's joining us today on this wonderful, brisk Saturday. Yesterday was a beautiful day, and today it feels like winter. I actually saw snowflakes. I don't know if that's a legislative agenda. It should be like, you know, no more winter, no more cold. It doesn't do good for my skin or my hair. With that, for those who don't know me, I'm the delegate from the 51st District, just having a little fun there. Hopefully you've all grabbed your coffee or another cup of coffee, because I always love it. We're having fun in the General Assembly, right? We are doing some really great things. And even last year, you know, we made some huge strides. But just let me take a step back before diving into that. I serve in Prince William's 51st District, which is, it covers Lake Ridge and Oaksville and parts of Occoquan and a portion of Dale City. When elected, you know, we had some big ticket items, and we definitely jumped in, just wanting to really make change in the Commonwealth, especially after we got the majority. So last session, we made a lot of strides on, the transportation, environment, equity, protections, gun violence prevention, workers' rights, and just so much more. And some of my colleagues have just touched on some of these very items. During special session also, we provided much of the needed COVID relief for Virginians and passed overdue criminal justice reform. And I'm just looking for this session as we're looking forward and building upon the progress that we've made to support working families. For those who don't know my story, I've shared before, I was a single mother working at a gas station here in Prince William County when my first child was born. And, I faced a lot of struggles from not having access to affordable health care or the resources to take care of me and my family. So, some of these struggles, although may not be the same, but some of our worries, the anxiety of not accessing healthcare or not having access to affordable healthcare, a lot of our families are facing these very issues right now as a result of COVID. And, that's why I'm focusing this session on passing, legislation that will provide the much needed support. So, this pandemic has really exacerbated some of the very things that that just were already fragile and just amplified that times two. This includes equity and food security and even our education system. And it has had a significant and a harsher impact on Black and Brown individuals in our Commonwealth. So, for me, no Virginian should ever worry about how they're going to put food on the table or keep their lights on in their home or a roof over their head, or how they're going to put food on the table. And, I am so glad with these elected officials here in the room with me today that we have individuals who are going to, think big, bring stronger leadership into Richmond and rebuild our economy. I've introduced several pieces of legislation, and that's one of these bills, I'm just really excited about, given my personal story. I'm chief patron on the paid family and medical leave in the House, and I'm patroning legislation to provide personal protective equipment and hazard pay to essential workers. Already we passed a program to train employees or state employees on public health and safety, out of subcommittee this week. So we were very excited about that. Also legislation we passed was to expand access to broadband in our rural communities by allowing municipalities in our rural communities to participate in the AEP Dominion Capacity Program, and removing the 30-day waiting period was another piece of legislation for auto insurance refunds. And I carried that on behalf of the SEC. So these are just 3 pieces of legislation that have just moved out this week, from last week to this week, past week. And I'm currently working now on a bill that will allow municipalities to create an outdoor refreshments area. And just before I hopped on, and this is some of my delay, besides taking my son to work, I'm talking to get the update and status on that. So I'm very excited. So this bill will, the outdoor refreshments bill, as I call it, will allow you to drink alcoholic beverages outside in certain areas. This will help our restaurants and breweries and wineries during COVID, as it provides, a source or an opportunity for outdoor services and, socially distanced. So with that in mind, I'm very excited to see that legislation. It's a work in progress right now, but we should hopefully see that in the upcoming weeks. Also, I have co-patron, several pieces of legislation, working with Delegate Hurst on legislation to increase solar net metering in parts of the Southwest of the state. This will help decrease energy rates and aid with our transition to renewable energies. I'm also patroning another bill with Delegate Murphy. She is the chief patron on this bill that will let our wonderful wineries and breweries take advantage of the program. It's another net metering bill. Delegate Mugler and I are also working together to provide tax incentives to our banking community for research and development, which every other corporation has. And again, this will help with the scientific research on job growth and and any other information that is needed to continually strengthen our economy. My bottom line when I go into the General Assembly, the thing that I carry with me is the spirit of wanting to collaborate with my colleagues, being that bridge builder. And, that is why our office always has an open door policy. So you can always feel free to reach out to us. We'll pop our information in the chat. I'll have Shannon do that now. But we have somebody at the end of that phone line when you call it. It is 804-698-1051. And of course, our email. But with that, I'll close and turn it back over to the good senator who shares this district here with me, and say thank you for having me and hosting this, as well as I'm his constituent and he's my Senator Barker, who's always been a wonderful mentor. So thank you for having me today. I hope we've covered a lot that we hope you reach out if you need more information. And I'm really excited about this year. You guys are on fire over there in the Senate as well.
Yes.
I just want to say, who needs coffee when you get Delegate Ayala in the middle of the day, right? I mean, that'll perk you up. Yeah.
We're socially distanced. We still have fun, right?
Yeah.
You got to bring energy to the work that you love. I think it's just about, having fun while you're doing it. And I enjoy my work. So it is, and my colleagues, because they always got something smart to say. Isn't that right?
Good. Yep. Well, I think that's right. So let's see. Let's get some questions. So Philip, do we have any questions?
Yeah, so while you guys were introducing yourselves, we've got about between 15 and 20 people watching on the Facebook Live throughout. I got a couple of questions coming in. First one from Valerie Garner. She likes the campaign finance bills moving forward, especially the one to prevent personal use of campaign funds, which is coming from Marcus Simon. Would you guys like to comment on that bill?
Yes. Yeah, that one's, I like the intent behind that. The implementation can be a little tricky, but I don't think there's any reason we should be using our campaign funds to pay personal expenses. But the problem is that you have to be very careful about how you write it. I know, for example, some people will set up, like cell phone accounts during the campaign cycle, and they pay their cell phone bill with their campaign funds. I don't do that, but I know I've done it in the past, for example, for some of my campaign workers, where I've had given them tablets that have accounts. And so that can sort of create a little bit of confusion. We pay for, food for our staff and for parties and things, and you don't want to create a situation where people could be accused of something where they didn't do anything wrong. And I just need to see exactly what the text of the bill says, but it's definitely a problem. I mean, if you want to go on VPAP, which is where all of our campaign contributions are disclosed and you can sort of search for them, one of the things that's always opened my eyes, if you go in and, for example, type in Sheets, like the Sheet stores, and you can see how much money campaign finance, how much money is being spent at Sheets. And the only thing you buy at Sheets is pretty much, gas and food. And, there's a lot of money spent at Sheets. And so some people seem to spend a lot of money at Sheets even when they're not campaigning. So like that, that to me is like the kind of stuff that we probably ought to be focused on.
What are you reading? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Anyway, I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think it's something we need to look at. We need to make sure we do it correctly so it doesn't like create some
Yeah, I think we need to bring, I'm with you. I think we need to bring some integrity, but with any piece of legislation, you definitely have to be, you have to be thoughtful about what you put out there in policy because it can have unintended consequences. The one thing I was happy to see is the exemption, for childcare, right? And I think that's very helpful. The nuances of, some of individuals who are parents, but especially women who are running for office, this is going to be very helpful. So, we'll see what comes out of the Senate. I think, can somebody remind me here? Was this?
Nobody put it in on the Senate side that I'm aware of.
All right. I was wondering if there was another change. I'm watching so many bills. Yeah, I think that, anything to bring integrity to our election system is always welcomed, but we also have to be thoughtful about the dynamics, again, to the child care exemption. And I think, as we watch it go through the House side on Delegate Simon's bill, we'll definitely see what kind of progress it makes. I think if it didn't pass out of committee, if I can recall that, I think there was some, and I'll have to go back and check the status of that particular legislation, but anyone can go on LIS, look up Delegate Simon and see the bill that he patroned and be able to see where it was left. And I could do that while Senator Barker jumps in.
Do we have any other questions?
Yeah, Philip, what do we got next?
Sure. Yeah. So next we've got a comment from Harry Wiggins. First, Prince William County is lagging behind in vaccinations based on national data. We should be vaccinating 1,333 people per day, but we're doing less than 400 right now, or fewer than 400. I'm not sure if it's an operational or a supply issue, but it needs to improve immediately. And he also included a note that the Prince William County Services Authority has $1.3 million in CARES Act funding for COVID-related delinquencies in water and sewer bills. And we've encumbered about $1 million of that. So there's $300,000 remaining for residents to apply for. So wanted to make that as a PSA for folks.
If I can just say, right now the Commonwealth receives about 110,000 vaccinations per week. And all of them have been distributed to the 160 health districts throughout the Commonwealth. We've administered more than 424,000 doses to 376,000 people. Additionally, Governor Northam has expanded the groups that are eligible to frontline workers, adults, age 65 and older, people 16 to 64. So these are the folks that are in 1B, and it is, we're rolling out, as quickly as possible and doing, and you've heard the governor this week. He is really working with our newly elected president. We also have to take in consideration when you've had Donald Trump in office for 4 years, obstructing everything from trying to intervene and take our PPEs and, just tools and resources away from these frontline workers and individuals who are working throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia and any other state. And then, we're having to, take alternate measures. And then he was also obstructionist when it came to the vaccine, right? He was saying it was fake, it wasn't real. So, because of the new administration, the Biden administration, everything didn't, happen gloriously when he was inaugurated. He had to put out a plan. We were in bad shape, and we still are, and individuals are dying of COVID. So, just to put this in perspective, we are 13th out of all the states in vaccine distribution, and we want to be number one. And I think the governor is going to get us there.
George, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just to add quickly, I mean, there has been, Prince William has been behind in terms of the vaccinations thus far. It's largely been a result of lack of personnel to be able to administer the vaccine. So they've had only a couple of places where they've been doing as sites for getting a large number of people vaccinated. I will say that I've brought my mother-in-law down to Kaiser in Woodbridge, and she, at 98 years old, she had a grand time getting her vaccine and had no ill effects on that. So there are some things that are going on sort of below the surface as it relates to the medical providers and entities such as Kaiser that are there. The situation that Prince William has encountered with lack of personnel to be able to administer the vaccines is not unusual. We're seeing that in a lot of places around the Commonwealth, which is why we worked on the legislation that we introduced on Thursday and got passed on Friday. So hopefully Delegate Ayala is going to get it when it gets over to the House and get it passed on Monday. So, but to get it in place so we can get volunteers in there. I worked with Senator Donovan, who is a physician, and she did a good job of sort of helping make sure that we got the right bill and have the right protections and everything in there. We do have protections on liability protection built into it, and also a streamline what people have to do to sign up to volunteer when they're already qualified mental health professionals, physicians, nurses, dentists, you name it. And I think we will turn this around pretty quickly here. So we are behind in Prince William, but as long as there are a couple of us working on it, and we certainly are, I think we're going to catch up pretty soon. And our staff have already been working together collectively together on trying to put some ideas out on how we could make it get the vaccines implemented even faster in Prince William.
Yeah, let me just show everybody something real quick. I want to share a screen and here. Can everybody see my screen? So this is the Virginia Public Access Project's number of positive tests by zip code, and you'll see that here in Woodbridge 22191, we have about 1,051 cases for every 10,000 people, and that's pretty consistent over here also in 22193, and then Dumfries is also right up close to 1,000, and up here up in Occoquan,
Lake Ridge, that's Lake Ridge area there.
Yeah, 672. It's a little bit lower up there, and of course, if you hop over the river into Fairfax, where you sort of, I think it starts to go down, 612 in Lorton, 334 up in Fort Belvoir, up where I live. It's only 342. Clifton, it's down in the 300s. But to me, it's I think it's important that we try to concentrate our efforts in the areas that really need it. And the Woodbridge area has been really hit harder than everybody else. I mean, the virus really spiked there early on. The precincts along the Route 1 corridor really are really in need. And so as we deploy this vaccine, I'm very focused on making sure that we have sufficient locations to put it out that are convenient to people who need to get to it. Right now, I think Prince William only has, 2 locations to distribute vaccines, and we're clearly going to need more of that, more locations if we're going to ramp up distribution. And then the last thing is, I was listening to NPR this morning, and I guess in Los Angeles, they're suspending some vaccinations because they just don't have the supply coming from the federal government necessary to deploy, even with the manpower they have. And so I'm very optimistic that President Biden's going to be able to reach his goal of 100,000 or 100 million in vaccines in the first 100 days. But hopefully with some federal coordination, we'll finally get better resources to work with. Anyway, long answer to a short question, but thanks for that. Go ahead, Philip, what's next?
The end of your answer there sort of tied into a follow-up question from Jill Palermo. She indicated that we're going to get 6,000 doses this week, and that the Prince William Health District currently only has capacity for 2,160 shots a week. She recommends more capacity at the GMU site. Did you want to get more specific on other sites that you think would be good sites to?
Yeah, you know what I'm really unhappy about is apparently the Prince William County school system turned down a request to use some school buildings for vaccine distribution. And I just want to be clear, it wasn't the school board that made that decision. So I think the school board is not happy about it because the school board would like to get all of their personnel vaccinated as soon as possible so we can start the process of reopening the schools as much as we can. So, but I think we need to use our school facilities and not just, I mean, a county of plus Manassas and Manassas Park, we can't just have 2 locations for 600,000 people. That's crazy. It won't work. So I think we need to really focus on more facilities. I think schools are the place to go.
And also, not that, aside from the vaccine, while we're ramping up, and as well as locations, just remember social distance, wear your mask, continue to wash your hands, and socially distance, as we are waiting. This is not over. We are, of course, cases are surging. And so we must do everything we can to be mindful and not be fatigued about the process as everyone are, as vaccines are rolling out, as we're going through the surge. And let's take care of one another, and again, we'll drop that information, the CDC information, or if you have it, Phil, if not, Shannon is here. She can also send it to you or message it to you, where individuals can go on the website to check, if they qualify and the locations.
Yeah, another thing is that we need to get them fairly widely distributed for the sites so that people don't have to drive significant distances. As we all know, Prince William is not one county; it's really sort of 2 counties.
It is.
You got the east and the west, and you got the land in between where there aren't that many people living there, and you generally don't get people from the eastern half of the county driving, to the George Mason site, as great as that may be for a lot of people who live in the western half of the county. And you don't get people from the Manassas, Gainesville, Haymarket end driving over to Woodbridge and the I-95 corridor. And so we have to have things available locally for people in both the eastern and western halves of the county so that they can access them readily. And and we clearly do have some people who don't have cars readily available, or there's 1 car per family, and that's taken by the person who's had to drive, to some other place in Northern Virginia to get it to work, and there's no ability for the rest of the family to be able to get that vaccine. So we needed to make sure that it's readily available. And one of the issues that we've had that has really affected Prince William has been that overall, in terms of the vaccine, in terms of the infection rates, the number of cases that we've had with COVID, and particularly early on in the process, the community that's had by far the highest has been the Latinx community. So there are a lot of people there who've gotten the virus.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, they've actually had the lowest rate of death rate of those who were infected. But we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to help them and others get vaccinated as well.
Yeah, I mean, we're not, we take this very seriously. The administration takes this very seriously, and we are acting. And that last Wednesday was a breath of fresh air for me. Now things are going to start moving in a very different direction. So I don't want to use the word excited because that's not the appropriate context, but I'm just looking for a better day, when we're past this pandemic.
Philip, what do we got next?
All right, next up, I've got a comment from Grace White thanking Delegate Ayala for supporting Delegate Bourne's HB 2048, which has to do with utility regulation and allowing purchasing from competitive suppliers. Delegate Ayala, you're a co-patron on that. Would you like to speak about that or just acknowledge Grace's thanks for that?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Sorry, it's the utility regulation bill from Delegate Bourne related to allowing electricity customers to purchase up to 100% renewable energy from a competitive supplier of electricity.
Yeah, it is the utility. It was this. Now he has a few of them. So I think she may be referencing the HB 2048. Is that the one?
Yes. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, I think that essentially, it also requires within 3 months after enactment that 100% of that renewable energy product to residential customers, or that there's competitive suppliers. So it's just opening up the market, the job market, and really allowing us to really have access to more renewable resources here in the Commonwealth. So I'm really excited about his bill. I'm very supportive of it, and we're going to pray. We're going to hope that it gets out of subcommittee and or full committee as it looks to hit the floor. I'll have to see where it is. I know it's been filed and it's been assigned to our subcommittee 3, so which I'm on. So it's great to have. We'll hear some testimony, more insight in some of those technical nuances. Anybody knows who has studied energy, this is a very big subject, and I have become more educated than I had desired over the last year with energy, and just some of those, some of the very technical parts of it. Last year with the Virginia Clean Economy Act, that was one of my educational pieces. It was over 60, I think it was 60 some pages of legislation. And it was one of the most pragmatic pieces of infrastructure that we set in action, going towards 100% renewables and reducing our carbon footprint. So I'm very excited about what this means, and seeing more energy to be able to kind of partner up with that clean economy infrastructure that we passed last year. And this would be one of them.
Yeah, just for whatever it's worth, I don't, that bill is probably going to have a really tough time on the Senate side, but
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Tell us
Well,
why.
Well, in the United States, we provide a universal electrical and telephone service to everybody in our society by providing it through regulated monopolies. And basically the state said, we're going to give you the ability to have a monopoly in terms of providing phone or electric, but you have to give it to every single person, because if you left just to the free market, they would only string the wires where it made the most sense, which is where in dense areas where people live really close together. And by doing the regulated monopoly model, it allows you to spread the cost across all customers and not just the people that it's the cheapest to provide it to. And that's how you get service to everybody. It's a very sort of a socialistic, some people would call it socialist way of providing service. And that was what our system was founded on during the Great Depression in the 1940s. And that's the model we followed up until I think about 2007. During the Reagan years, there was a push to deregulate different types of services, like the phone service, like airline regulation, other things. In Virginia, we tried deregulating our electrical markets from 2007 until actually, it might have been before that, George. I think actually
it's a little before that.
Yeah, we re-regulated it in 2007. We tried deregulation, then we went back to regulation in 2007. That's what happened, because it didn't work. Nobody came in and tried to provide service. And from my perspective, it's a lot easier to, for example, set renewable energy goals, to tell people we want to focus on wind or solar or whatever. If you only have to tell 2 or 3 incumbent providers, this is what we want you to do, instead of creating up some free market model and just sort of seeing what the free market drags in. So
I don't know. God, well, this,
I know. Well, we disagree about it, but that's where the Senate is pretty much, I'm sure, on this. And so
wait, Phil, before we go to the next one. No, come on. So essentially, reading the bill, you understand this will help us provide 100% of renewables from any supplier, right? It's allowing incumbent electric utilities to participate, and then this also requires discounted clean energy offerings to low income Virginians. So this is pro-consumer, pro-clean energy. And you know what, Scott, I'm just proud of this bill. Competitive markets is a good thing, right? Let's be
not when it comes to regulated monopolies. I don't think it works for electricity very well, but we just told Dominion, the VCEA, the act you mentioned a minute ago, we actually just told Dominion and Appalachian Power that they have to go 100% renewable in the next couple decades, and we've ordered them to do it, and they're going to do it, and they're going to spread the cost amongst everybody. In fact, wind is incredibly expensive, and wind is one of the best ways to do renewable energy. And and to spread that cost amongst all the rate base, we need as many people as possible paying in to keep the cost as low as possible for everybody. And if you start allowing people to just jump ship and say, I'm going to go buy it from some company in Massachusetts or something, it starts to undermine our ability to do renewable energy as cheaply as possible to everybody, including our low income communities. So
I mean, I hear you. I
that's-
don't
that's-
disagree with some of that thought form, right? But I think that there's I think with any piece of legislation, as we're discussing policy, we can look at ways to, dot the I's and cross the T's, right? If there's some concerns in it, just take a look at it, right? I don't know where maybe have a conversation with the patron, right? I'm just a chief co-patron on it. So, don't shoot the messenger here. But
okay, I just wanted to make sure everybody knew what my position was on it, getting the questions out there. So, but I'm pretty sure
Hey,
this.
Phil, why did you go to that question? You knew
they-
where your boss was standing on that.
No,
But here you are.
I answer every question. I don't.
I mean,
I don't. I
We do
don't.
have a
I don't
follow-up.
hide.
You guys would like,
Nobody's hiding.
there's a follow-up on this running debate, which is Grace adds, has there been any discussion among legislators about restructuring rates to decouple production from profit?
That's a good question. I think that's a good question for the longer term. If we're going to stick with the regulated monopoly model, I think there's things we need to look at like that. There are also things we need to look at, for example, whether or not we ought to allow people lower rates if they use a lot of electricity. Right now, if you tend to buy a lot of electricity, you get a lower rate, whereas some people would say that encourages consumption, and we ought to be doing the opposite. And we've just reconstituted the Virginia Electrical Utility Regulation Commission, which I serve on, and I've been begging the chairman's Senator Saslaw to try and sort of get some sort of heavy issues over there that we can try and vet outside of session to sort of set a long-term vision on some of these things that we just haven't looked at in decades. So that to me is one of the things I think we ought to look at.
You know what? This is going to be something y'all need to mark down for the books. Because I'm going to agree with Scott on that particular comment, and maybe not every aspect of it, but just some of it. And I think we do need to look at this, right? To your point, I think this is why we've had the Clean Economy Act, and we're going to get to the renewals, desired, 100% renewable energy, but it is going to, it's not going to happen overnight, right? We've got to be pragmatic about it. We've got to take steps that are going to work and making sure that we do work. Again, I am not the SME subject matter expert on energy. So, our energy, I don't want to say committee member or chairperson, the good senator here, he'll school me, or we'll have a heated discussion.
George, you want to put your foot in the pool, or are you?
George is like, I'm George is like, yeah.
So let's move on to the next question here. So
All right.
that's my thought.
Move on to a completely different topic.
George, you're up.
From Beth, actually, this one's from Beth Tolley specifically for Senator Survell, although I think everybody should comment. Hi, Senator Survell. You worked hard in the special session on assault and battery bill. I understand it was pulled because of discovery that it may have had unintended consequences. Do you believe the current assault and battery bill will accomplish what you had hoped to?
Yeah, the bill I carried last in the special session died in the House Courts of Justice Committee, theoretically because it had a couple issues. It was very easy to fix those issues. There just wasn't much of a willingness to fix it at that moment. So anyways, we went back and fixed the issues that they've raised. Senator Morrissey said he wanted to carry the bill this year, and so he's the one that introduced it. We heard it in committee last week, and it needed another little tweak, which he's making, and then we're going to probably pass it out. My guess is either Wednesday of next week or the following Monday, and then it goes back to the House. So,
Scott, as you're talking about the bill, for those who don't know who it is, it might be helpful just to tell them what the bill did. And
yeah, that's a good point. So the bill basically removes the mandatory minimum 6-month sentence for somebody who's convicted of assaulting and battering a law enforcement officer. And just so everybody's clear what that means, in the world of criminal touchings, there's a whole series of touchings. if I just make a move at you, like I fake, if I act like I'm going to hit you, or if I swing at you and miss, or throw like something at you and miss, that's an assault because you didn't touch anybody. If you touch somebody in an angry way, that's an assault and battery, and it doesn't require you to be hurt. So if I just poke you like that, that's an assault and battery. If you're not a law enforcement officer, it's a class 1 misdemeanor. You can go to jail for 12 months. If you're a police officer, if you do that to a police officer, it's a felony. And today it carries a 6-month mandatory minimum sentence.
And
Whether the,
Senator, isn't this something that also impacts people with disabilities?
yeah,
and-
I was going to
and-
get to that in a minute, just so
Okay, I'm
people
sorry, go
understand,
ahead.
people understand the framework.
Mhm.
If you assault somebody bad enough to where they receive an injury like broken skin or a broken bone or a concussion, that becomes malicious wounding, and that carries a 1-year mandatory minimum sentence. Or so, for example, you throw like a brick, that's an attempted malicious wounding. It's an attempted felony malicious wounding of a law enforcement officer. Or if you throw a really hard object, or if you hit them repeatedly, that could be malicious wounding. And then if you go higher than that, it can get, there's maiming and murder or whatever, right? But the problem with the assault and battery statute, it takes just the slightest amount of force to cause that. And so a lot of times, like a police officer will try to arrest somebody who's got autism or a mental illness. They'll have a bad reaction to it. Their arms will flail out, or they maybe have a spitting reflex or something in their hand flies out and strikes the officer. All of a sudden, they're looking at a 6-month mandatory minimum sentence and a felony conviction for that. And there's been situations where people have been charged with a 6-month mandatory minimum sentence for an onion ring flying out and striking an officer, or drops of water falling on an officer's shoe, or again, somebody who has an involuntary reflex doing something. And so this bill just attempts to create more flexibility in the system so that if it's a really minor touching, it doesn't result in a massive consequence to somebody's life, or basically a felonization of mental illness, which is how a lot of people really see the statute. So there was some concern about whether there were some alternative sentencing programs that the bill might have affected last session. That's all been fixed.
Mhm.
It's going to come back this session. I'm pretty optimistic it'll pass. The worst situation I ever heard of was there was a child who was in school who pointed a laser pointer at an SRO in a cafeteria. And not only was the child convicted and sentenced to 6 months, it went up to the Virginia Court of Appeals and was affirmed that hitting an SRO with a laser pointer in a cafeteria gets you a felony and a 6-month mandatory minimum sentence. And the Court of Appeals was like, hey, that's the law. That's what we got to do. The law was changed after that to pull laser pointers out, but still it just sort of highlights that sort of how ridiculous some of the outcomes under that statute can be. And I think we can protect our law enforcement officers and incentivize people from not hurting them with our existing malicious wounding law or by making these amendments. So hopefully it'll
Senator,
pass.
this is a really good bill, and I commend you for putting it up. And even though it needed some work, as a mother with a child who's autistic, right? We saw the Mockus alert last year, that was up to try to address, not this particular issue, but issues around individuals that may have disabilities or have these types of reaction when engaged with law enforcement, right? And so this really scares me. I have a 23-year-old son, and he as a Black man, 23-year-old with autism, you can just, let's just shape that picture for you, right? There's going to be, there is, just so much that parents would fear in instances like this, especially if they were in distress, right? And needed some help. And then, while you're looking to individuals to help you in a time of need, you get convicted of a crime. This is something that just really cries out to people of color, communities of color, specifically African-American communities. So I commend the legislation. I'm optimistic. I heard about it from a constituent who has experiences like I'm explaining, and some that you are. So, I'm happy that it's, you've worked on it, and, Senator Morris, he's going to carry this hopefully over the finish line, and I'll look to support it over in the House side.
Awesome. Thanks, Hala. What do we got, Philip?
All right, great. We have another question from Valerie Garner. This one's related to an issue that you brought up during your introduction. She said that she has an overpayment from a September 2020 inpatient stay from a hospital. She overpaid the hospital, and there's also an overpayment to the doctor, and it's so hard to get that taken care of. So if you wanted to comment on that issue, and I know Senator Barker, the bill is affixed to a bill that you had last year, so I think that might be good for you to comment as well.
Yeah, and that issue, I'm not sure that specifically relates to it's kind of a species of what my bill is aimed at, but I don't think it's directly affected by the bill I'm carrying. So my Healthcare Fairness Act amendments have to do with the time frame that a provider has to get the bill to the carrier for reimbursement, so that the carrier sort of knows how much they're paying for a person in a reasonable period of time, and so that the insured patient, the consumer, knows how their deductible is being impacted on a relatively current basis. Healthcare billing is a total nightmare. I mean, I see it in my personal injury cases and my divorce cases, or my child custody cases, where parents are having to sort of reimburse each other for bills all the time. The nightmare it can be sometimes to get bills paid. And of course, I have to deal with it myself. I have 4 kids, and somebody has a minor procedure. You got bills coming in for 3 months. So, and then sometimes a check shows up out of nowhere or whatever. So I'm not sure my bill specifically deals with that, but I don't know, George, if you have any thoughts about that scenario.
Mhm.
George works in the healthcare field, so he's our guru on
I
this.
have experience. I was for a few years director of the Greater Prince William Community Health Center, which has 3 locations across the county. I mean, the Senator Somerville is correct. I mean, the reimbursement system and the process for the interplays between the insurance companies and the providers is just a total mess. And often when you have someone who goes to the hospital for something, there's a bill that is produced, and it is often 3 to 4 times what it actually costs to provide that service. But they put those high bill situations out there because that way they can get a much discount, give a much kind of discounted rate to the insurance companies in negotiating the rates that are the payment rates that are there, and come out whole. And so it makes often makes no sense. You have some services that the health providers make, both the hospitals and also the physicians and others make huge profits on, and others that they lose substantial amounts of money on every patient they have. So it's a horrendous system right now. And at some point, we need to get that fixed. We've had some discussions, and we have done a couple of things to address some issues in certain areas, such as for substance abuse services. And it's already made a huge difference once we had a rate that was consistent with the, what it really costs to provide the service in a quality way. I don't think your bill is addressing that issue directly, but it is one of the related issues, because when, what is put into is in your bill is time periods. And once you have a time period there, it needs to extend, both between the provider and the insurance company, but also the individual policyholder who's affected by that. And many instances, the policyholder writes a check, and it does take an extraordinary amount of time for them to get the reimbursement for that check. So we probably will be dealing with that aspect of things, since not all of the issues are going to be resolved with the legislation you have. We will be dealing with that with the Health Insurance Reform Commission next year.
Right. What do we got next, Philip?
Great. We have a question in the Zoom from Kevin Williams. He is on a construction site, so he's not able to ask it. So I'm going to do my best to summarize here. It has to do with reparations. He believes that reparations for African-American communities should not only come in the form of a check, but also include the opportunity to build wealth and create opportunities to share and assist in the growth of others who desire to build a business. How can we start the legislative process to get some consideration to craft legislation that provides access to opportunity and wealth creation? He notes issues with Native Americans who have had their land taken for oil reserves and things like that, and issues around corporations that have made money off of that land and how we can provide equitable distribution.
Yeah, so the first thing we're doing, I can say right now we're doing is with regard to the marijuana legalization effort we're doing, there's a major social equity component built into that. And I know there's going to reserve a certain percentage of the retail licenses, the manufacturing, I believe, for minority applicants, um, to make sure that the communities that have been unfairly stigmatized, affected, disrupted by the war on drugs over the last, whatever it's been, 80 years now,
Mhm.
have an opportunity to benefit economically um, from that. You know, in other states where they've legalized, there's been a lot of big companies coming in to manufacture and sell marijuana, and I'm not sure that most of those are not really, I would say, owned and operated um, by either African Americans or Latinos or other people who've been in the affected community. And I know, so that's part of our objective. And there's going to be some very explicit and specific requirements in our bill for that. I don't believe the bill's moved through the House yet. I think it's just sitting in committee, but we've already had about 10 hours of hearings in the Senate on it. And the bill just got reported out of our rehab committee. It's been sent over to the Judicial Committee and then on to Senator Barker's committee. So that I think is a good first step, but there's no question that more needs to be done.
I think that we will be working long-term on some of these issues here in terms of providing opportunities and incentives for minority individuals and corporations to be able to compete on a more equitable basis. We have a program called SWAM, small women and minority-owned businesses there. And on a lot of the contracts that are done through the state, we'll have 40% or more of the subcontractor, either the contractors or the subcontractors will be receiving monies, and they meet that definition. The problem is that they nearly all meet this definition of the small business because we have a very broad categorization of small businesses, but they rarely are meeting particularly the minority-owned businesses for African Americans and Latinx and Native Americans and others. There's a little bit higher rate for women-owned businesses, but we've not really made that process as effective as it could be. And I served for several years on the Small Business Commission. We've had a lot of discussions on it, and we're starting to get some more action taken now. There certainly was a situation with a court case in Oklahoma just about a year ago, if I recall correctly, where the courts ruled basically that the Native American peoples who lived in that area were due extraordinary compensation. So I think that there's an opportunity, with the courts finally stepping in and addressing long-term issues like that. The opportunities are going to be there to develop some creative solutions to be able to help move things forward for everybody. And you're correct. I mean, that African Americans may not be far behind white Americans in many instances in income levels. The biggest disparity is in the wealth side of things and the home ownership and all those types of things. And we have to address those types of things to be able to bring all of society into a comparable position.
I think the senator has commented on a lot of these particular issues. Like last year, Governor Northam's did an executive order. This was beyond the legislative side to do a study on, the disparities of minority women. What was it called? The Women and Minority-Owned Business in State Procurement, which is talking about just the accessibility of bidding for businesses and, being able to create that entrepreneurship. And so he selected a firm, I think it was earlier this year, to do the disparity study because he was saying, I think the executive order, if I can remember correctly, give me a second, 35 in July of last year, and it talked about the very thing you're stating, Senator, and it just assembled a panel of state agencies to draft the proposal for this particular study. And so that is, and it's, that is actually, in movement right now. And the 2011 study, disparity study, found that only 2.82% of total state contracts were awarded to women and minority-owned businesses. So this, of course, is not making progress, but with this particular panel and with this research company that has won the award to do this, this report, hopefully more, as the senator said, will come out of it. Also, the Virginia Legislative Black Caucus, which I'm a part of, is supporting legislation and implementing low-income housing tax credit and passing, the anti-NIMBY bill to eliminate discriminatory housing practices and local land use ordinances or guidance during the session. Also, we're, looking at legislation as we've done, because again, it's not just what has happened prior to us, it's what's happening, now, especially with COVID. So, we are definitely talking about in the General Assembly about our economy and ensuring that during COVID, Black Virginians have access to the resources they need. And so, for far too long, we've lacked, the safe and affordable housing, which has been barriers to some of the economical infrastructures and the prosperity levels of Black communities. So this needs to be addressed, and we are taking steps to do just that.
Great, thank you. Our next question, this is from Greg, who followed us over from the meeting earlier today. We're starting to run low on questions, but Greg wanted to ask for support for budget amendments from Senator Eben and Delegate Krizek to save River Farm and preserve it for public use and enjoyment. Earlier this month, the Northern Virginia Conservation Trust and Nova Park submitted an offer to purchase the park and turn it into something similar to Occoquan Regional Park. And there's a budget amendment to provide, I believe it's $2 million to help them with that effort.
And appreciate Greg bringing that up. It's not really a Prince William. Well, it's a little bit of a Prince William issue in that the entity that's trying to purchase the park is the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority, which maintains parks on behalf of everybody in the entire region. And
if they take down the trees, it's going to potentially result in some runoff into the river that'll flow down toward the Prince William. So.
Well, River Farm is about a 30-acre parcel on a bluff overlooking the Potomac River right off the GW Parkway, and it's actually where I got married. So we better save it. But it's been owned by the American Horticultural Society since 1973, when they received $1 million donation from one of the Annenberg sisters who was into public gardens, who wanted to save it because the Russians were about to buy it to create a dacha, a summer residence. And she gave the money so the AHS would buy it and then maintain it for public use. And it's been sort of an open facility for everybody in the community to use for the last 4 decades. And now the AHS claims they can't make it, they're losing money, and so they want to sell it to some gazillionaire to build a not even just a mansion, like a massive house on it. And so we're trying to save the property, and there's a proposal for a $2 million grant from the state in there to help come up with the hopefully $15 to $20 million to buy the place. And if we do, it's a facility that anybody in Northern Virginia could rent and use for parties or events. And it's really an incredible property and an opportunity. There's not many decent event facilities on the Potomac that are available for public use. Fort Belvoir Officers Club is one I can think of, but you can only get in there if you're military.
Or you went to Mount Vernon High School. That's where the prom was.
We had our West Potomac prom there for my senior year. No, but it's.
Oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know we let you guys for West Potomac yet. But,
yeah. The George Mason Science Center on Belmont Bay is also a facility that you can rent, but it's not quite the same. But anyway, I'm hopeful we can get it done, George. Make sure you put that in the budget for us. So anyways, thanks for bringing it up, Greg. Yeah. Well, thanks for bringing it up, Greg.
Yeah.
What else do we got, Philip? Any more questions?
I think we're pretty close to wrapping up. Julie is on advocating for the bill that you brought up at the beginning. Julie, I'll invite you to unmute if you'd like to raise anything further about that.
Oh, Julie Stranley.
Yep.
Thank you, Philip. Thank you very much. Thank you, Senator Serval, for your championing this bill. As it is known, the Civil Rights and Employment and Consumer Protection Act. And it is before the General Laws Committee on Wednesday. And we have a very strong coalition in support: the Virginia Employment Lawyers Association, the National Women's Law Center, the Virginia Poverty Law Center, and other leaders. And I apologize, I missed it at the beginning. I don't know if you talked about the specifics and why it's so important. It's an esoteric bill, but it specifically impacts, for example, our National Guard members who are often the victim of discrimination for their service and subjected to forced arbitration without legal recourse. So the bill will give localities the opportunity to determine if their vendors are not complying with those laws.
Thanks, Julie. And Julie, I did talk about it a little bit, but this is a bill this is one of 4 bills I'm carrying this session that passed the Senate and died in the House, Hala. I've made some changes to this one too, which I'm hopeful will make it better. But it basically says that a locality can ask about a company's arbitration practices with their employees and consumers as part of the procurement process. And mandatory arbitration is a way that many companies hide what they're doing and hide their bad behavior. And for example, they'll put in there that if you're an employee, if you have a sexual harassment claim, you have to arbitrate it. You can't go to court. And that makes it impossible for anybody to see how many sexual harassment lawsuits have been filed against you as a company. Or for example, if you have a product liability problem, or if you have a problem with the services that have been provided, you have to do an arbitration process. And arbitration is typically a much less friendly place for a plaintiff to get relief, whether you're an employee or a consumer. And so it can be more expensive in some ways, and it's much harder to appeal if there's a mistake that's made in the process. It's usually tends to be very friendly, corporate friendly, and I think it's antithetical to our right to trial by jury. So it's also supported by the Fairfax County School Board, which has it on their legislative agenda. And I believe Julie's got some other localities to sign on. We have a big national coalition that's hoping we can get it done this year. So that's a little bit about the bill. I'm hopeful we can get it out the Senate.
So can I add, our federal delegation is strongly supportive of legislation to ban forced arbitration, including all of our delegation: Jennifer Wexton, Congressman Conley, Congressman Byer, Bobby Scott, Elaine Luria, and Abigail Spangenberger. And Congressman Griffith actually co-sponsored legislation that our partner, Gretchen Carlson, who's working with us, is working on, and that would have banned forced arbitration and sexual harassment and discrimination claims. So it is a bipartisan issue.
Right. So Fox and Friends is with me too. So yeah. So good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to working with Gretchen Carlson on it. Actually, I've been emailing with her about it and hoping she can testify. So, but thanks, Julie. Do we have any more questions, Philip? We're all done.
Yeah.
Okay. So, well, we have all the questions. We can leave this up here for posterity for everybody to see. I just want to remind everybody to be safe. Make sure you wear a mask. We have a national mask mandate now. Everything I've read about this vaccine says that right now, the only thing they do know is that the vaccine prevents you from becoming symptomatic, but they're not sure that it actually prevents you from transmitting the virus to other people. And so it's important that you still keep a mask on even after you've been vaccinated until everybody's been vaccinated. And if you have anything you need from me for my session, please contact my office. Either pick up the phone and call us, send us an email, contact me on Facebook or Twitter. I even have an Instagram that my staff is making me use now. And that's how you can get me. And my staff, Philip is my chief of staff, and Celine Grasnow is my legislative aide. And I have some help with it from Aaron Coogan and some interns also this session helping out with communications. So thanks for being on. George, you want to finish up, and Hala can go after you.
This was
All right, yes, thank you everybody for participating. I enjoyed talking with people today and answering questions. Certainly get in touch with us on things. I've already, Julie's already twisted my arm, sent me a chat, and we responded. So we'll be talking with her on things. So, but thanks to everybody for participating, for all you do in the community. And Delegate Ayala is up.
Thank you, George. Scott. So yes, thank you so much for having me today. I've enjoyed, and as you see, I always have fun with my colleagues. I love our family. We're doing good work. If you ever need us, reach out. You have our contact information. We'll put it, we'll give it to Philip to put in the Facebook feed. We're in the 51st, we're here to help. And so let's do this together. Let's get past this pandemic and continue to keep one another in mind and check in on our friends and our family, our neighbors, just to see if they're in need, and our safety in mind. With that, take care. Happy Saturday. Stay warm.